I found a really interesting statistical quirk in how the Des Moines Register Selzer poll was conducted that found Kamala Harris ahead of Trump in Iowa. Now, it's still possible that there is sampling error. It is still possible that there has been a surge toward Harris, but there is a quirk with how they count likely voters and how they deal with people who have voted early that could really tilt this toward Harris as well. So the big quirk is this. In the poll, to count likely voters, they only count people who have said that they are definitely going to vote. So they ask people, like, what is your likelihood of voting? And it's either definitely, probably, maybe, or definitely not, or already voted. And so they ran the same poll in late September, and they found that Trump was ahead by 4 points. But of course, back in September, really no one would have voted. But the important thing is, in their likely voter model, they only count the people who say they will definitely vote. They exclude the people who say they will probably vote and the people who say they will maybe vote, unless you have already voted, in which case you are counted no matter what you've said before. So if the Harris voters, especially the ones that said probably or maybe, if they already voted and are more likely to have already voted than Republicans, that is going to greatly distort who is considered a likely voter in the population. So let's walk through the numbers, assuming that the 54% threshold was correct in the September 24 poll. So in this top cells, I make up some numbers to show one example of how there could be more Trump voters than Harris voters in Iowa, and that how from the likely voters, you can get this 54% Trump by looking only at those who would have definitely voted. So 100 divided by 185 gives us 54%. Harris 85 divided by 185. Again, this is just an example to illustrate how the inclusion of already voted will make such a big difference when they're only considering the definitely voting. So now let's go down. So, and if you look at this across all the Trump voters and across the different ways that they describe themselves, there were 200. Again, this is just easy numbers. And for Harris, it's 170. And again, that's split across people with different affinities toward voting. So now let's go down to the, plausible scenario for November 1st after people have voted. So importantly, I'm still assuming the exact same proportion of Trump voters and Harris voters or people who favor these candidates in the population. There are still the exact same number of definitely nots, and none of those would have voted. But there are people who have voted, and they could have come from people who previously said definitely, but also people who said that they were probably going to vote or even maybe vote. But the important thing is, in this assumption, is that there are more people for Harris who have already voted than there are for Trump. And the people who have already voted come from both the definitely category and the probably and even some of the maybes. And now, when we look at the likely voters, and the likely voters are people who are definitely or already voted, divided by the total for both candidates of definitely or already voted, suddenly we see Harris is ahead of Trump. Now, again, keep in mind, nothing has changed here, right? In this example, the only thing that has changed is it went from 0 early votes to 90 already voted, right? I just made up these numbers. But the important thing is that there are more Harris voters who already voted, and those people who already voted come from some of these categories that were excluded here and not considered likely voters. So again, could other things be happening? Could there be a surge toward Harris? Absolutely. Could it be sampling error? Absolutely. But here's this statistical quirk, and my understanding is that the Democrats have been more likely to vote early. But here's this quirk with the Selzer poll, and specifically because they only consider those who who said that they were going to definitely vote as likely voters, and they excluded the people who probably vote and maybe vote. That could cause a distortion. That could cause a surge toward Harris if her fans, if her supporters, are the ones that are more likely to vote early.